Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. Our program will begin shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage, Judy Woodruff.
Hello again, hello again. Please continue to enjoy your dinner. We have a fabulous program in store for you. As anybody who has seen the latest Ken Burns documentary series, Country Music, knows very well, Catch Secor is not only a talented performer, but also a dedicated student of his craft. He is prominently featured in that series, Country Music, but he first caught the nation's attention as the front man of the Americana string band Old Crow Medicine Show. Yes. They have won multiple awards, including 2 Grammys. They have been inducted into the Grand Ole Opry. Please welcome back to the stage Catch Secor, accompanied by Shelley Colvin. Welcome them back.
Thanks, Judy. Well, it's such a privilege and a pleasure and honor, really, to be here tonight. Thanks so much for having us. I came up from Nashville, Tennessee to be with you here. So I'm impartial on the fight between the Stros and the Nats. My team didn't make it. Also, I'm normally traveling with an entourage of a lot of dudes that play music, but I just came out by myself because I found it hard to get that many banjos under the belly of an airplane. So I brought my friend from Huntsville, Alabama. Make welcome Shelley Colvin. We're celebrating LBJ tonight, and so we're going to play a little bit of Texas fiddle music. Now, there's ample dance floor opportunities out there. And if, you just put your plate down and you feel like you're ready to shake a leg, you might want to get out on the dance floor. Hold on a second, Shelley. I'm raring to go. Just about there. Wait a minute. Here it comes now. Let's play a few old fast fiddle tunes for an old breakdown, a little lanky Texan. Thanks a lot. Yeah. Just getting warmed up now. I called my mom today and she said, "You're where? You're doing what?" And she said, "Oh my, LBJ is the reason I got into teaching." My mother, in 1964, when she was in the 8th grade, heeded the call of responsibility and civic duty when she answered LBJ's request to become a teacher's aide in a aftercare program in rural Ohio, and thus joining the workforce of folks who all cared to band together to make a difference. So here's one for you, Mr. Johnson. We're going to play the Yellow Rose of Texas because it always sounds a little sweeter here in D.C. when you hear that old Texan roar.
Yeah. Thank you so much. The Yellow Rose of Texas. Well, let's see. Any friend of teachers is a friend of working people, and any friend of working people is a friend of civil rights. I come from the volunteer state of Tennessee, and just last winter, a year back, I was headed down to Memphis with my 8-year-old daughter to march in MLK 50, and we walked out, we parked the minivan, and we headed on out. And my 8-year-old daughter, she picked her knees up like this almost to her chin, and she said, "This is how you march, Dad." And she started singing a song she learned in school, so I'm going to play it for you right here. I woke up this morning with my mind while it was standing on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind while it was standing on freedom. I woke up this morning with my mind while it was standing on freedom. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. I'm walking and talking with my mind while it was standing on freedom. I'm walking and talking with my mind, Lord, it was standing on freedom. I'm walking and talking with my mind while it was standing on freedom. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah.
Well, we're going to play one more for you. I think it was Mr. President Johnson who said that books and ideals are the greatest weapons to fight intolerance and ignorance. But I'd like to add, if I might suggest, that one of the other good tools in that fight, another good weapon, is the power of song. So here's a song I wrote, and I'd like to dedicate it to Speaker Pelosi tonight in thanks for her leadership.
Yes.
Kick it off for us there, Ms. Colvin. Headed down south to the land of the pine, thumbing my way to North Carolina. Staring up the road, I pray to God I see headlights. And I made it down the coast in 17 hours. I'm picking me a bouquet of dogwood flowers. Well, I'm hoping for Raleigh, I can see my baby tonight. All right, so rock me, mama, like a wagon. Rock me, mama, like the wind and the rain. Rock me, mama, like a southbound train. Hey, mama, rock me. I'm running from the cold up in New England. I was born to be a fiddler in an old-timey string band. My baby plays the guitar, I pick a banjo now. All of the North Country winners been to get with me, and I lost my money playing poker, so I had to up and leave. But I ain't turning back to live that old life no more. No, 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 no. So rock me, mama, like a wagon wheel. Rock me, mama, any way you feel. Hey, mama, rock me. Oh, they're singing, rock me, mama, like the wind and the rain. Rock me, mama, like a southbound train. Hey, mama, rock me. Oh, oh yeah. Walking due south out of Roanoke, I caught a trucker out of Philly, had a nice long toke. But he's headed west from the Cumberland Gap to Johnson City, Tennessee. And I gotta get a move on, babe, for the sun. My baby calling my name, and I know that she's the only one. If I die in Raleigh, at least I will die free. So rock me, mama, like a wagon wheel. Rock me, mama, any way you feel. Yeah, mama, rock me. Oh, rock me, mama, like the wind and the rain. Rock me, mama, like a southbound train. Yeah, mama, rock me.
Catch Secor and Shelley Colvin. Give them another hand. That was great. So that was a treat, and you are in for another one. Because collectively, our next group of presenters have portrayed 2 U.S. presidents, a vice president, a secretary of state, a governor, and the first man on the moon. Here to read the speeches of President Lyndon Johnson and Speaker Nancy Pelosi are Tony Goldwyn, Jane Atkinson, and Michael Gill.
Former British Prime Minister Clement Attlee once said of the oratory of his contemporary Winston Churchill, "Words at great moments in history are deeds." Lyndon Johnson led and Nancy Pelosi continues to lead our nation during great moments in history, moments of peril and moments of possibility. And their words have helped to guide us and define who we are and what is expected of us as Americans. Here are some of the words of President Lyndon Johnson and Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
We have many challenges facing us. Today, it often feels like America's greatness and goodness is clouded by angry language, fear-mongering, and incivility. And some have forgotten that we are all God's children. There is a spark of divinity in each and every one of us, and every person is worthy of dignity and respect. We cannot allow this negative attitude to be normalized or accepted. It is up to all of us to ensure that America always remains good, that we remain a beacon of hope, a people of great generosity, a nation of unwavering integrity, and that America's heart is always filled with love. We will succeed because America is a great country. Our founders gave us their guidance. They were very clear. E pluribus unum, out of many, one. They could not have possibly imagined how many we would be or how different we might be from each other, but they knew that we had to be one. Nancy Pelosi, commencement address at Mount Holyoke College, May 20th, 2018.
America's greatness is guaranteeing to every child all the education that he or she can take. America's greatness is bringing the miracle of modern medicine to every humble citizen of this land. America's greatness is equality of race, respect of religion, and blindness of color. America's greatness is food for hungry people. America's greatness is the helping hand to the child of the slum. America's greatness is training for the unemployed. America's greatness is willingness to lend a helping hand to our neighbors from other lands who seek freedom here in our shores. Lyndon Johnson's speech in San Antonio, Texas, November 21st, 1965.
Our common cause is to find and forge a way forward for our country. Let us stand for the people to promote liberty and justice for all. And always, always to keep our nation safe from threats, old and new, from terrorism and cyber warfare, from overseas and here at home. That is the oath we will take to protect and defend. As we take office today, we accept responsibility as daunting and demanding as any that previous generations have faced, guided by the vision and values of our founders, the sacrifice of our men and women in uniform, and the aspirations that we have for our children. Let us meet the responsibility with courage, wisdom, and grace. Nancy Pelosi remarks upon becoming the Speaker of the House of Representatives, July 3rd, 2019.
Under the covenant of justice, liberty, and unity, we have become a nation, prosperous, great, and mighty. And we have kept our freedom. But we have no promise from God that our greatness will endure. We have been allowed by Him to seek greatness with the sweat of our hands and the strength of our spirit. It is the excitement of becoming, always becoming, trying, probing, falling, resting, and trying again, but always trying and always gaining. In each generation, with toil and tears, we have had to earn our heritage again. If we fail now, then we will have forgotten in abundance what we learned in hardship. That democracy rests on faith, that freedom asks more than it gives, and that the judgment of God is harshest on those who are most favored. Lyndon Johnson, Presidential Inaugural Address, January 20th, 1965.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, please direct your attention to the screens for a special tribute video honoring Speaker Pelosi.
And tonight I have the high privilege and distinct honor of my own as the first president to begin the State of the Union message with these words: Madam Speaker.
I wasn't elected Speaker because I was a woman. I had to prove that I would be the best for the job. When the opportunity came, I was ready. My motivation for even being in public life comes from my family, that public service is a noble calling.
Her father was in Congress, and then he was the mayor of Baltimore from the time she was in first grade till the time she went off to college. So public service was the language they spoke in the house she grew up in. We never, ever thought she would run for public office. But she started volunteering at the California Democratic Party, and she became friends with Sala Burton, who was our local congresswoman. And then Sala got sick and summoned my mother to her deathbed and said, I want you to run for my seat.
Without objection, the gentlewoman from California is recognized for 1 minute.
The President has again decided to cast his vote against civil rights. Today, I am pleased to introduce the AIDS Health Care Financing Act of 1988.
The infant mortality rate is an embarrassment. It's the tragedy. It's immoral. We must do something about it. 1 in 5 children in America lives in poverty. And so that has been my sort of North Star. What does this do for the children?
No woman has ever risen so high.
Biggest election night for the Democratic Party in years.
Nancy Pelosi could become the first woman House Speaker.
To the first woman Speaker in our history, the Gentle Lady from California, Nancy Pelosi.
I did feel a real responsibility to other women. As I stood on the shoulders of those who went before, I knew that others were standing on mine.
For our daughters and our granddaughters, today we have broken the marble ceiling. For our daughters and our granddaughters now, the sky is the limit. Anything is possible for them.
Nancy Pelosi worked very well with both Republican presidents and Democratic presidents. She's always looking for common ground.
Everything that I accomplished during my presidency, in part, was a result of Nancy's outstanding leadership.
Many of us thought that we had a challenge to our generation. There was Social Security long before us, and now we were having Affordable Care Act, a pillar of health and economic security for America's working families.
Nancy combines a set of qualities that you don't find in a lot of outstanding legislators, politicians, or leaders generally. She is tough. She knows her stuff. She has a moral compass and knows what's important, but she also knows what she can compromise in order to get stuff done.
I met LBJ when I was a student, and he was courageous, and he'd go out there and be bold in terms of the War on Poverty and Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act. It was just a joy to behold, but I knew that it took courage, and I respect the courage of Lyndon Baines Johnson.
I think if LBJ were here tonight, he would be proud of his soulmate because he was the master of the Senate. She's the master of the House. She loves the institution. She loves the legislative branch. That's her life. She never wanted to be any other place.
You know, I think when the history is written about Congress, it's going to be pretty clear that there weren't many, if any, who were more effective in leading the House of Representatives and functioning as Speaker of the House than Nancy Pelosi. I was very proud to work alongside her. I consider it one of the great honors of my life.
Our common cause is to find and forge a way forward for our country. Let us stand for the people to promote liberty and justice for all.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage Vice Chairman of the LBJ Foundation and Chair of tonight's dinner, the Honorable Ben Barnes.
Good evening. It was the year of 1787, and the deliberation of the Constitutional Convention was being held in Philadelphia. Under great secrecy, there were a lot of important American leaders there: George Washington, Alexander Hamilton, Thomas Jefferson, and Benjamin Franklin. They'd been proposing revisions to a very weak and inadequate Articles of the Confederation. As the proceeding ended and word spread out through Philadelphia that the convention had reached a final draft, the crowds gathered outside of the hall. And the answer was provided soon after they had completed their work, when a woman asked Dr. Franklin, "Dr. Franklin, what have we got? A republic or a monarchy?" With no hesitation, Benjamin Franklin responded, "A republic, if we can keep it." Speaker Pelosi told that story this last month at the Texas Tribune Festival, and I have not been able to get those words out of my mind. Those 5 simple words: it's a republic if you can keep it, simply was not a response, but I feel it was a call to action. The country was founded by people who had the courage to board the ships and risk their lives as they crossed the ocean for a better life. And in the short 243-year history of this country, we've faced trials and tribulations that test the foundation and the beliefs of our republic. President Johnson summed it up very well in his last address to the joint session of Congress in 1969 as he prepared to return for Texas. And he said, and I quote, "In our time, we have come to live with moments of great crisis. Our lives have been marked with debate about great issues, issues of war and peace, issues of prosperity and depression, but rarely at any time does an issue lay bare the secret heart of America itself. Rarely are we met with the challenges not to our growth or our abundance of this country, our welfare, our security, but rather to the values and the purposes and the meaning of our beloved nation. Each time our republic has faced a great threat to our meaning of the values, and there's always someone that has risen to the occasion and protected our most basic ideas time and time again. For example, in the midst of political uncertainty, George Washington solidified our democratic process for the succession of powers by not accepting a third term and returning to Virginia. And on a cold night, Abraham Lincoln determined that the cost of a civil war was worth the opportunity for all men to be created equal. And during the very serious Depression, Franklin Roosevelt urged the New Deal to revive the prosperity of struggling families in America. In this moment, ladies and gentlemen, I find our nation and its values and tenets that those founding fathers established so many years ago in Philadelphia to be challenged and compromised. But I have hope. I have hope because there's always been people who stood up and have faced our greatest challenges with courage. And tonight, I have the very distinct pleasure and high honor of introducing a woman who's not afraid to look us in the eye and tell us no matter how large the obstacle or how difficult the problem, we will overcome. Her courage, her commitment to the upholding the Republic for the preservation of liberty and justice bring me hope. I've seen Speaker Pelosi's heart and soul, and it's strong, it's resilient, compassionate, and good. No one, and I truly mean no one, works harder than she does. The reason she works so hard is because she understands that the choices that are made today in Washington are not hypothetical situations. These decisions have actual impact on so many lives in America today. These decisions that Speaker Pelosi knows is a great example why ordinary people need a champion. And she's always devoted her life to preserving our nation's most fundamental creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. Liberty and justice isn't dependent on what zip code you live in or the color of your skin. The notion of what brought us together when our founders set pen to paper and created not a monarchy, but a republic to be preserved and protected by our generations. History books detail these heroes, people who have stood up and defended our country and its creed. Speaker Pelosi, your name will be indelibly written in the history books of America when our nation faced a very critical time. And you stood and fought and fought and fought to preserve this republic. I have the honor to present to you not only a great American, but a woman who America needs today as we've probably not ever needed another human being. I present to you the Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, Texas, I'd love that, of the United States House of Representatives, Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
Speaker Pelosi, this is an honor of a lifetime for my sister and myself. As I stand here this evening, I can't help but think of a hymn that resonates in my heart. Once to every man and nation comes the moment to decide in the strife of truth or falsehood for the good or evil side. As an accident of birth, I had the privilege of a lifetime to stand behind my father when he signed the last great immigration bill into law that opened our country's shore with liberty and justice for all. I cannot speak for Lyndon Johnson in his death, as I can assure you I dared not in his lifetime. But I believe with all that is in me that he would be so proud and grateful as the Lyndon Baines Johnson Foundation and all our family is, that you are now standing with liberty and justice for all, and leading us in a time where we can remember how important it is to consider all that we have in common, not just what divides us, and pursue that goal that he cared more about than anything, liberty and justice for all.
Going to have, isn't this something? Can you just imagine the honor of it all to be here with Luci and Lynda, to hear them speak about their father. I do have something I want to say about their mother later when we have our conversation, but you can see how proud she would be of the two, Lyndon and Lady Bird would be, Mr. President and Lady Bird would be, of Lynda and Luci. Thank you so much for being who you are and your great tribute. This is something so beyond my even grasp of such an honor, an award given in the name of President Lyndon B. Johnson, but also called Liberty and Justice for All, everything that our country is about. And I was thinking when Tony was speaking and quoting President Johnson's inaugural address when he said, "We must not forget in abundance what we learned in hardship." Lyndon Johnson did not.
and to hear his speeches when he talked about teaching children the poor parts of Texas. We met him, Paul and I met him when we were students, and we met the vice president, and what was so outstanding to see is how he treated the little children who came up and shook hands with him. One of them said, "I'm never going to wash my hand again," after that. So I will have an opportunity in a moderated conversation to say more about this, but I do want to thank the foundation for this wonderful honor, which I accept really on behalf of my colleagues who make so much of what we're talking about here this evening possible for me as the Speaker of the House. I'm honored to receive an award that two of my colleagues, John Lewis and Jim Clyburn, have received, and I spoke when they did, and John Dingell when he received it as well. I do want to say that while we were acknowledging so many members of the House who are here, and that was pretty thrilling to see, there are members of President Johnson's House, the Senate, here too. I saw Senator Whitehead, I saw Tom Daschle and Ken Conrad. For two, there may be others who are here. But as Alexandra said, he certainly was master of that House, and it's so nice that some who served then, or at one time or now, are here as well. So I thank Cappy McGraw and Lloyd Hand for making this evening such a wonderful success, and that is an applause line. I thank Larry Templeman, the chairman of the board, for his kind remarks and for his leadership of the foundation, and for all those who made this evening such a success for the university, for the Lyndon Johnson School of Public Service. And I thank my dear friend, Ben Barnes. I was a person who needs no introduction, but he gave me one anyway, anyway, to use his words. He has been my friend and Paul's friend for many, many years. We're in awe of him, to see how he moved with such grace in the world of politics, whether it was in Texas or Washington, D.C., across the country. He gave me much encouragement along the way, and tonight he gives me this great honor of this award. I love receiving it, and I love receiving it from Ben Barnes, and that is an applause line as well. Thank you. So with that, I think that Ron Kirk and I are going to engage in a brief conversation about, here he is, you know him from Texas. So many titles, such a great man. Mr. Mayor, Mr. Trade Representative.
Madam Speaker, if you'll join me. Judy.
Okay, here we go.
Congratulations again to Speaker Pelosi. And joining her in conversation, as you just heard, is the former mayor of Dallas, Texas, and the former U.S. Special Trade Representative under President Obama, Ambassador Ron Kirk.
I know too many of you have to be looking at me like I'm Dick Stockdale tonight and wondering who am I and why am I here. But what an honor to be a part of the LBJ Foundation and have the opportunity to have this conversation with you. I'd like to start in the video that we just saw. Madam Speaker, you talked about your passion for public service, and you talked about meeting LBJ as a very young woman, as a student, but I know you've had a long familial history with the Johnsons. Would you share that with us?
Well, I'll tell you a couple of stories because my father served in the Kennedy Johnson administration, and during that time, Mrs. Johnson would invite the spouses of some of the appointees to the Johnson home. And I remember one time, Luci and Lynda, I saw them, they were younger, but I saw it along the way when they were teenagers. And then I went with my mother to one of these. I was in school in Washington. I went with her to one, and Lady Bird was just as gracious a lady. Anyone who knew her knows how radiant she was with her graciousness and the beauty that she wanted to make that she spread throughout America were all in her debt. But at this time when I went with my mother, she said something that for some reason I just never forgot. She said, one of the challenges that I face it was that, you know, I'll be in Texas and I'll be in Washington and I'll say I'm going to wear this dress, and all of a sudden I find out that the belt is in Texas. And now I find myself in the same situation. Another story I want to tell you about my family connection. I haven't even told this to Luci and Lynda over time because it's fresh in my mind. My brother, young Tommy D'Alessandro, passed away last week. He was Mayor Young Tommy. My father was Big Tommy. But anyway, in 1964, Ron, he went over. He was president of the city council in Baltimore. He went over with the governor, then Governor Tawes, who was probably twice his age because Tommy's like early 30s, and they go to see Lyndon Johnson in the White House to talk about the presidential election and the race that was going to be held in Maryland coming up. They go to the Oval Office, and those of you who are familiar with it know this better than I would have. He said it wasn't like you go to the Oval Office now and you're in there with the president. There were all kinds of activity. In this corner, people were doing this. Over here, people were doing that. And we went over to the desk where we spoke to the president with all this hum going on in the room. Everybody busy and buzzing and doing the president's will, no doubt. And so the governor gives this big glowing, Stenny would know, big glowing report about how things were great in Maryland and the president was just going to sweep the state and it was all great. Well, this was 64, and this was George Wallace coming in with a poisonous message of anti-civil rights and seeing that on the horizon, making a big pitch for that. And it was, in certain parts of Maryland, it had a resonance, sad to say. So after Governor Tawes made his presentation, my brother Tommy, who was then the president of city council, young, he says, Mr. President, with all due respect to the governor, that's not the way I see it. You have big problems in Maryland. George Wallace is on the move. This anti-civil rights thing is sadly having a resonance. It's horrible, terrible, but we really have to have a very strong campaign to prevail. And he goes on and on and on. And Lyndon Johnson says, Tommy, I don't want any crybabies around here. Does that sound familiar to any of you? I don't want any crybabies around here. Just tell me what you want me to do. And Tommy did, and the president made his own adjustments to it. And then they did win Maryland, 52 to 42, something like that, which was a fight because he was the president of the United States. But that threat was there, and Tommy could see it. But we always laughed over time saying, imagine the president of the United States saying to him, we don't want any crybabies around here. I'm going to have to use that line sometime.
Well, I think that I'm reasonably certain that Tom Johnson and Lloyd Hand could tell you that might have been one of the most gentlest things that LBJ ever said to anyone. But, you know, I find what an interesting contrast listening to your words and those of President Johnson, and now having you reference that poisonous rhetoric and spirit of George Wallace versus what some people feel is the verbal sewage that comes out of the president's Twitter account every day. And in the earlier video we saw about the LBJ school, the one thing that resonates with us is the spirit of young people. But what would you say to those young people that feel the toxicity around politics, the poison that's seeping into our discourse? What would you say to encourage them to consider public service?
Well, obviously the need is more so than ever. I know we always say these are the most challenging times. This is the most crucial election of our time. Have you ever heard that? But the fact is that for young people, just think of it, to be young, to be in college or just newly out of college or be young at this time. A future ahead of technology on the move in a way that we ain't seen nothing yet. A communication in real time to enable you to put your point across, but nonetheless menacing because of other poison that can be put in the air and on the airwaves. So I just say the opportunity is bigger than ever. Know your own power, the power of your passion, what vision you have for our country, liberty and justice for all. Big two words meaning so much. Liberty and justice for all capture so much, whether it's economic justice, social justice, environmental justice, any kind of justice, liberty, freedom, ever-expanding freedom in our country. So with that thrust and your version of what your passion is, whether it's climate, as we saw for some of the students earlier in the video, or whether it's education that Lyndon Johnson, his granddaughter Jennifer is here as a public school as a teacher, how proud he would be of that, because he spoke so movingly about what he learned from the children when he was a teacher. So whether it's climate or education or justice in every form, or world peace, whatever it is, have your vision, know your subject, have a plan on how to get it done, and as Lyndon Johnson did, connect with people by sincerely, authentically showing them that you care about them, and that's what he did. For me, to these young people, I would say, just listen to what we heard, what Larry said at the beginning, and Judy said also. We had music at the beginning in the middle of our proceedings, but at the beginning, we heard all of the things that Lyndon Johnson accomplished, and that was music to our ears as well. Because while they may have been titles of bills that would become law, they made a tremendous difference in the lives of the American people. So know your power, be yourself. The best advice I ever give anyone is be yourself, your authentic self. Lyndon Johnson was his authentic self. We agree with that. But don't agonize. Our motto is, and my daughter Alexandra, who was in the film, thank you, Alexandra, she knows it in our family. I always say when we're out there to win an election, we don't agonize, we organize. So make a plan, have a plan.
Well, Speaker, we're certainly celebrating you being your authentic self. You heard it alluded to tonight. There are a couple of other events that have captivated this city's attention this evening. And at least last time I checked, it was 0-0. So you all can all
So you haven't missed anything yet.
But tomorrow, Madam Speaker, you have to engage the Congress in perhaps the most serious discussion you've ever had to undertake in your tenure, not just as Speaker in Congress, on the issue of whether or not to impeach the president and to begin that proceeding. And cynically, there are many that believe, yes, that it'll pass the House, but given the tenor that we've heard from the leader on the other side of the aisle, that it wouldn't go anywhere. To share with us your thoughts about the necessity to move forward, and then depending on the outcome, how we go forward from there.
You want to talk about that? I thought we were having a good time listening to Ketch and Shelley and the beautiful music, and wouldn't Lyndon Johnson love that, to start off with all that music, and now we talk arts, sports, politics, and now this. Well, let me just say this, because my dear friend Ben Barnes referenced comments I made at Austin, the Texas Tribune event just a couple weeks ago, where he honored me with his presence there. And by the way, Willie Nelson came too, so that was great. Here's the music, the arts, that's going to unify us. That's what brings us together, I truly believe. Yeah. So, since you asked, I wouldn't have brought it up. But let me just say this. And many elected officials or people who have been involved in public policy for a long time in this room, and some young students from the LBJ School of Public Policy. Nobody I ever knew or know goes into public life to impeach a president of the United States. This is sad for our country. It has to be done prayerfully and carefully, solemnly. It has to be done honoring the sacrifice of our founders, as I said earlier, as I was quoted as saying earlier. Our dear Mr. Barnes quoted what Benjamin Franklin said, "A republic if we can keep it." Prior to that, in the dark days of our revolution, Mr. Clyburn and I were talking about this at the table. In the dark days of the revolution, Thomas Paine said, "The times have found us." The times have found us. For them to declare independence, to fight a war, to win a war, to write our founding documents. Thank God they made them amendable so we could expand freedom over time. A republic, if we can keep it. We do believe that the times found all the people that Ben Barnes mentioned, the leaders of our country over time. And what was said earlier about Lyndon Johnson being like Abraham Lincoln, doing more for civil rights and civil liberties in our country than anyone. Times found them. But the times have found each and every one of us, each of us gathered here, because our interest in public policy, and that means our interest in the future. We do believe that there is a risk to the republic if we do not maintain what our founders put forward. 3 co-equal branches of government, separation of powers with a check and balance on each other. So we didn't have a monarchy. Our current occupant of the White House says, Article 2 says that I can do whatever I want. Well, that just isn't so, Ron, Mr. Ambassador, Mr. Mayor, so many times. That just isn't so. Article 2 doesn't say that at all. Article 2 defines the executive branch, which is to implement the laws of the Article 1, the legislative branch, and the rest. But the actions that have been taken are a challenge to our Constitution. And while I did not want to go down this path, as was said, e pluribus unum, for many one, let's stay united. Weighing the equities, the oaths that we take to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States demand that we protect and protect and support the Constitution of the United States. We have to do that. We take an oath in office to do that, and if someone is disruptive of that, beauty, genius of the Constitution, the separation of powers. Our founders did not want a monarchy. That's why they wrote the Constitution the way they did, and that's why Benjamin Franklin said what he did, if we can keep it. Well, we must keep it, and we see that as our responsibility now. Mr. Clyburn, our whip, has given me a very good report about our vote tomorrow. He's the vote counter. Thank you, Mr. Clyburn. And at that point, we will go forward to, in a transparent way, putting out how with a path. And by the way, we give more opportunity than we were ever given in any such proceedings. But that's okay. That's okay. Now, no decision has been made to impeach the president. This is about the inquiry to continue to learn the facts, to seek the truth. And how we connect with the American people is defending our democracy for the people, sadly.
Thank you. Thank you. That was powerful, it was honest, and I think that's a message that America needs to hear. That'll be the last we talk about that. Now, you mentioned the arts and music and dance, and I have 2 daughters who absolutely adore you. But they did want me to ask you this. I find it fascinating that particularly a lot of young people in this country have read more perhaps than you intended into your relationship with the president based on 3 iconic pictures. The first as my girls call it, the shade, the coat, popping the collar on that red coat and putting on those red shades after you left the White House. The second, as I have been taught by my girls, is simply known as the clap. And now finally and most recently is what we call the point, where you dismiss. Now, I guess somewhere in here there's a question. Are we reading too much into that? But what can you tell us about those moments and how they reflect how you've had to deal with this president?
I assume somebody's looking at pictures of these things here?
This was on my own.
Oh, you're on. Okay, so it's sort of orangish, but you want to call it red, white, and blue. Very patriotic, wouldn't you say? Let me just, before I answer that question, go back to your initial introduction of it. I do believe that the arts are such a unifying force in our country. And let us thank Tony Goldwyn, Michael Gill, and Jane Atkinson for being with us. As Luci said, none of us speaks for Lyndon Johnson, but I think he might agree, maybe not, that we like hearing our words spoken by professional actors. Somehow, did I say that? Oh my gosh. So let's thank them and Ketch and Shelley for the beautiful work. Because the poet Shelley once wrote, the greatest force for moral good is imagination. Imagination. When you hear beautiful music, when you hear poetry, whatever, when you see a painting, when you see a play, we laugh, we cry, we're inspired, and forgetting all of our differences. It's unifying. And then with our imagination, we can put ourselves in other people's shoes and understand them and have that conversation that is with barriers relaxed because we've found some common ground in the arts. And thank you, Lyndon Johnson, for creating the National Institute of the Arts and National Endowment for the Arts. That was so many things that he did were so wonderful. And I thought I was going to talk about all of them, but they have been referenced. But just to associate with how he saw public policy making a difference artistically, educationally, environmentally, in so many ways that might not be considered traditional in that respect. No, I just wore what was clean those days. That was what that red coat was, and that was what that white suit was, and that was what that blue suit was. So in any event, it's a funny thing, just talking about the art picture. Look at just the picture of that, just boom, made such an impression, a visual, an optic. So again, we have to understand the world that we are in, the message that we convey, the optic, the visual part of it plays so much of a role. I wish it didn't, but it does. And so I don't know if you want me to talk about those. It would be getting us back to you know what, so probably we don't. Probably we don't. Let's move on from that address.
Well, you mentioned...
Tell your daughter I said hello, please.
I will. You mentioned a litany of legislative accomplishments from President Johnson, and you also mentioned in our previous discussion that no one runs for office to impeach a president. So I know at the heart of your, this is not about impeachment, at the heart of your service is service and doing things that will improve the life of this nation's children and families. So I want to switch gears and give you a chance to talk about the other things that you're working, and perhaps talk about those one or two accomplishments in your career that you're not only most proud of, but that you're certain are going to make a difference in the lives of generations to come.
Well, thank you very much for that, because on behalf of my colleagues, I would like to tell you what we really do most of the time, not what the press likes to talk about most of the time. First of all, let me just say how honored I am that another president, President Barack Obama, honored me with the words that he said in that film. And a lot of it focused on the Affordable Care Act, which I do consider to be my biggest legislative accomplishment. Working with Harry Reid in the Senate and President Obama in the White House. His words mean a great deal to me. And wasn't it fun to see George Bush say, to start a speech at the State of the Union like no other president ever has, Madam Speaker? That was so gracious of him. Here's the thing, I know this is a nonpartisan, non-political event, but just as a matter of public comment, last year, in 2018, in the most gerrymandered, voter-suppressed political arena you could name or identify, the House Democrats won 40 seats to take back the majority. Just a matter of history. With the help of some in this room. What we did in that election, out of respect for our constituents and those who, when I say constituents, I don't mean supporters, I mean constituents, everyone there, was to put forth our agenda for the people. For the people, we were going to lower the cost of health care by lowering the cost of prescription drugs and preserve the pre-existing medical condition. Secondly, lower health care costs. Secondly, bigger paychecks by building the infrastructure of America in a green, resilient way. Third, lower health care, bigger paychecks, cleaner government. To end the voter suppression, reduce the role of big dark money in politics, give people confidence that their voice was as important as anyone else's. Now, on the first two, I think we have a chance with the president to perhaps lower the cost of prescription drugs. I certainly hope so. He's talked a lot about building the infrastructure, not necessarily green, but if we say resilient, maybe we can do that. And I think we could do that. Cleaner government, I don't think he's particularly interested. However, that is fundamental to our restoring confidence in the public that we are there for them. For them. I'll quote another president, and this was very, people say, oh, the elitist, this, that, and that. The patrician president of the United States, Franklin Roosevelt, when he died, you all know this story, but I think it bears referencing now. And people came to train stations to see his train go by when he passed away. And they said to one crying person, "Why are you crying? Did you know President Roosevelt?" And he said, "I didn't know him, but he knew me." You all know that story. Patrician Roosevelt, Oshkosh, Bagosh, overalls, he knew me. And that is what we all have to restore, that confidence. And big, dark money is a barrier to people having confidence and removing them. So that's it. But in addition to that, we have sent over H.R. 1, which is the cleaner government. We have sent over legislation to fight the climate crisis now. We've sent over legislation for gun violence prevention with their background check legislation, which is supported by 90% of the people. Equality, which is to end discrimination in the LGBTQ community, is supported, bipartisan support across the country. Support for the Promise Act to support our dreamers, and thank you, Lyndon Johnson, for being so early and courageous on immigration in our country. For women, equal pay for equal work. Raising the minimum wage, which is important to women because, say, 30 million people will get a raise, 20 million of them women. And ending our Violence Against Women Act, very important to us. It's to be renewed. For young people, again, climate action now and promoting net neutrality, so we have broadband, open all, high speed, always on broadband across the country for young people and old people in business and health for every reason that to go with. We sent a large array. So this morning, the leader on the other side, he said, Mr. McConnell, he said, I'm the Grim Reaper, which is, I don't know, is that self-deprecating or is that a compliment? I don't know. I'm the Grim Reaper, so all this is going to die over here. And then he says, and we've sent him scores of bills. I just gave you a sampling of some of our priorities. He said, they don't do anything over there except impeach. No, we have a mountain of bills on your desk over there for your consideration. So that's what we're doing. But we really do believe that the lower drug prices, our three priorities, the drug prices, the infrastructure, how we make an economy that is fair, reward success and achievement, not resented in anyone, but also make sure that it is fair in terms of the opportunity that gives people. And central to that, of course, is what Lyndon Johnson cared so much about: education, education, education. So we have an array of, my why, and I told you have to have your why, your vision. Why would you get involved in all of this? Why? My why is the 1 in 5 children in America who lives in poverty. Paul and I have raised 5 children. It just bothered me so that 1 in 5 in America went to sleep hungry at night. 1 in 5 lives in poverty in America still. We have to have a society that lifts everyone up, especially the children. I'll also tell you this, just in following up your question about, this may sound a little Lyndon Johnson-esque, you let me know. I say to people, this is not for the faint of heart. When you get into this arena, this is tough. You become a target. You got to be ready to take a punch. You better be ready to throw a punch, too, for the children, for the children.
Well, we want you to keep throwing punches, and we are so blessed that you stay true to your authentic self. And I don't know that President Johnson would be any prouder than he would be tonight, knowing that you are receiving this honor. Join me in thanking and congratulating Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
Thank you, everyone. Congratulations again to Speaker Pelosi. Thank you to Mayor Kirk. And on behalf of the LBJ Foundation, thank you all for being here. Good night.